It's great. But the obviously the metal box themselves, they're hard to come by and vastly expensive. You'd have to be an idiot to get one if you're ready like this. So cue the music. Here comes the idiot. And there it is. And it is a lovely thing to have.
Hey, everybody out there, welcome back to another episode of the Audiophiles. Andy and John here, and it is time to listen to some music. And, John, you are going to be offering up something for the class today. What do you have in store, my friend?
Another salvo from the wonderful Public Image Limited.
Oh, okay. All right. So we've tapped into one of their songs so far. We are going to be doing another, it would seem. I'm looking forward to this. What's the track?
Be careful what you wish for. The song is Poptones.
Poptones.
Isn't that a nice little, pleasant little title?
It is. It is. It reminds me both of
Poptones.
pop music and pop tarts. So
Exactly.
so let me give this thing a listen, and I will come back and give you my thoughts. Aiden, what are you saying? This is really interesting how this whole thing. So, I mean, we're just over a minute into this. That really like there and gone, sort of like weird super trans, like when you would wrench on the dial of like your radio tuner, you get that transistory type sound that starts, and then in comes the music, which is interesting in and of itself, right? You got this jaw wobble, right? That's what we're working with on bass here. Very accomplished bass player. Um, Playing this very odd. It sounds good, but it is quirky and different. It's this atonal, off sounding bass line, yet it's working. These very I don't know, the way the drums are produced is interesting too. It sounds a little bit like DIY-ish. But they're all this metal work with the crashing and splashing of cymbals, a little bit of the ride as well. Gives it this very small eye industrial sound, not like, not like the genre industrial rock, but like just this clanging and banging and shuffling and like mechanical almost type sound to it. Um, and then this very interesting vocalization that John Lydon is doing as well, and these perhaps the prettiest part. I don't know if it's the most interesting, but it's definitely the prettiest part. These sort of cascading, picking guitar notes that kind of fall over top of it all. Um, Definitely a very interesting, different, semi-off kind of sound to the music. And I have to say, minute into this, all of those descriptions would fit perfectly into most of Per Ubu's sound. So that there is kind of this, for me, I'm drawing correlation to something I'm more familiar with, as one does when they're hearing something for the first time. And I'm really drawing these correlations back to Per Ubu in my mind. I don't know if that's a valid comparison or if it's just my, me doing me things, but I'm I'm definitely picking up on stuff that reminds me of Per Ubu's work. So, which is never a bad thing. I really enjoy Per Ubu and their how different they are in their sound, and there's a bit of that going on here. So we've got a lot to go. So let's see where we head from here.
Drive to the forest in a Japanese car. The smell of rubber on concrete tar. Hindsight does me no good. Standing naked in his back of the woods. The cassette played Poptones.
I'm pretty sure those are lyrics that John has delivered during an introduction very recently, so that stands out to me as well. Also, just kind of interesting, evocative lyrics, you know, something about driving to a forest in a Japanese car and the smell of rubber, hindsight doing no good, um, and then something about standing naked in the back of the woods is an interesting picture that they're painting. Um, sounds a little, I don't know, unsavory. But yeah, we will see where it goes from here, and maybe I will get a clear picture of how the story unfolds and what kind of story we're dealing with. Those drums. Music is just so constant and persistent and kind of like as interesting as all of it is, it's kind of unchanging. It's just this one thing that just keeps moving with all of this like interesting, persistence. Hmm.
A drive to the forest in a Japanese car. The smell of rubber on concrete tar. The hindsight does me no good. Standing naked in his back of the woods. The cassette plays Pop Tones. I can't forget the impression you made. You left a hole in the back of my head. I don't like hiding in its foliage and peat. It's wet and I'm losing my body heat. The cassette plays Pop Tones.
Okay, the he repeated the first verse and then we got some new content to shed some light on the situation. And yes, this is pretty dark and unsavory. So it sounds like it's written through the perspective of the victim of some pretty horrific stuff like sexual violence and murder. Um, the allusion to being naked and left in the amongst the, was it pedant foliage or whatever, the the loss of body heat is, you know, life leaving you. Your heart stops, you're not really producing body heat any longer. So that's pretty grim, and it's made even more grim by this idea of, like, if pop tones is supposed to be like the idea of like pop music, like playing, it's really odd to like have this, you know, horrific crime scene um unfold to the soundtrack of pop music, and it instantly makes me think of like a Tarantino film. Like, what is it, like that Steelers Wheel song that plays in Reservoir Dogs during that very like bloody gross scene, um with like the torture essentially scene in that film, if you've seen it, is like an interesting song to pick for, you know, the visuals that are unfolding. And this idea of something so awful happening to this, I assume, young woman, while pop music plays, you know, out of the back of some, you know, Japanese car while they're in a forest doing the deed to this poor victim. Yeah, is really odd and kind of morbid and, but interesting. I mean, I can't deny that. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. This stuff definitely piques your interest and definitely makes you think. Now, if you you likely aren't going to enjoy what you're made to think, but it still makes you think, and that's got to count for something, right?
This bleeding heart, looking for bodies, nearly injured my pride. Praise picnicking in a British countryside. Poptones. Poptones.
There are times where I think I'm catching like this swirling, ghostly echo of Lydon's voice buried deep in there. Which, if I am hearing that, it's on my mind playing tricks on me. That's a really interesting choice as well, too, and kind of makes sense given everything that I just outlined. Very interesting choice to employ to help tell this story. It's very grim story. jamming out on this. Wow. What a really interesting song. I mean, musically, there isn't a lot of variance going on. Like once it starts and is fully formed, you know what you're kind of getting from there on out. But it is just so persistent in its in the way it moves, and it's just a constant um force, really. The bass is just really very interesting in how like atonal and odd it is, and yet how all the other instruments kind of work around it and make it work. Yeah, good stuff. Those drums crashing, some rolls and flourishes here and there sound great. That kind of circular guitar picking motif works, and it sounds really, really good. All the while, this really dark story is told. Yeah, I would like to learn more about this. This seems like a very interesting song that I'm sure a lot of people have opinions on because of just how original and different it is. I'd love to learn more about that and see if any of my um, suppositions about the narrative are true or accurate or even in the ballpark. So let's get back to John and have him fill in some of these blanks on a very, and we throw this term around a lot, but I truly mean very interesting number that I just listened to here. So let's get back to him.
Oscar Goldblum, you're back. So you have experienced the delight that is Poptones. What did you think of it?
Well, it lacked both any semblance of poppy nature or a delicious fruit filling and a cardboard tasting outer crust. So this was a this is a bit of a surprise because it didn't exactly do what it said on the tin, as you say. Right out of the gate, I hear this like interesting, almost transistor-like sound, akin to like the sound made when you used to turn the tuning dial on your radio really fast, and we get that sort of sound. And then come these crashy and splashy cymbals and this wonky but interesting sounding bass work. And some bright picking guitars that cascade over this very odd canvas of music that has been created by the band. And I'm but sort of a little over a minute into the song, and I'm already getting very strong Pere Ubu vibes with its small eye industrial sounding drums. So not like industrial like the Nine Inch Nails genre of music,
Yeah.
but more of this like mechanical, clanky sound that we have this oddly atonal bass that somehow works in spite of it, you know, going against all the rules of music, you would think.
Yeah.
It's
one of the most amazing bass lines you'll ever hear.
Yeah.
Because it's so odd.
Yeah.
It's just off kilter.
It is. It's like
yeah,
looking
anyway.
into a mirror at a fun house or something like that. Like it's just warped. but it does work. And then you have Lydon's like interesting vocal delivery and the guitar's repetitive like picking motif. It's kind of very circular sounding and how it's just kind of always goes back. So it's like yeah, cyclical. Which again are all kind of things that you would find in a lot of Per Ubu's work. This interesting take on music, to put it in a very general term. But yeah, you've got that in spades with this track. And it's difficult to strike a balance between focusing on what is happening musically while also paying mind to the lyrics. Though I think I caught some of what was being sung, and though I couldn't make sense of it at first, I still found it interesting. Lydon, not always in key, and who could blame him when trying to match the music that he was accompanying, delivers this first verse dry, and I think I got all or most of this. I think I have the gist of it. Drive to the forest in a Japanese car. The smell of rubber on country tar. Hindsight's done me no good, standing naked in the back of the woods. Now, this stood out to me for a couple of reasons, but one, I'm pretty sure I recollect you having quoted this in a recent episode introduction, as you are wont to do on episodes where I'm providing a track. So that stood out to me. But also, it stood out to me because of its evocative nature and how it paints what could be, what I think could be quite what I think at this point could be quite a grim picture. And it only becomes more clear and thus more grim as I get to the second verse. But before we get there, the line about like the cassette playing Poptones is delivered, and there's this hauntingly interesting echo that of that line, I think, that kind of swirls around and fades as the music keeps chugging along. It gets very lost, but is still there.
There's like ghost vocals.
You literally took the words that I was about to say out of my mouth. Yeah, it is ghostly, the way the way it's produced and the way they're presented. Also, speaking of production, there is this, and I don't mean this as a pejorative or an insult in any way, shape, or form, but there's a very DIY production quality, mostly on the drums on this one. Like I've heard drum tracks recorded on like 4 tracks or 8 tracks that sound, that were done by like my band or bands that we played with that we were friends with that sounded almost of the same quality. But there's something charming about that kind of DIY nature to the way that they're laid. And it doesn't take anything away from what is actually being played, which is some really good drum work. I mean, we got some great fills. All the cymbal work is really interesting as well. And I like it, but it has this kind of like stripped back quality to it that I actually find appealing, especially as it's presented here. They jam for a bit as the drum strikes punctuate the music, and then the first verse is repeated, if I recall correctly, only to then be followed by a second verse that, as I mentioned earlier, brings the narrative more into this very grim focus. It would appear that the song is written from the perspective of the victim, likely a female, taken out on a long drive into the woods, who is then likely sexually assaulted, given that she's naked. At least that's what I believe is said in the lyrics, and then like shot in the back of the head and left amongst the foliage and peat, as Lydon puts it. And again, all while this is happening, there are sounds of Poptones as kind of the soundtrack to this awful, occurrence. So again, there is more of this eerie echoing of the refrain, Poptones swirling in the distance, like the faint lamentations of a ghost, I have written here. So there you have it. All the while, this main musical motif continues to be relentless and is just this constant presence. The quirky bass with its odd tone and notation, the guitar adding this cascading beauty as it's picked through the notes, and the drums pounding on skin and cymbal to create all of this sound that is really persistent and continuous throughout the whole song. And it would appear we have another one of these really intriguing, dark stories of human depravity, sexual violence, and murder, all through the vantage point of the victim, as I stated before. And that is only, and that kind of makes it that much more interesting. It's sort of like the ghost of the girl in the well, kind of this perspective of the person who it was perpetrated against, rather than this sort of like omnipresent view and description of a scene. It's more oddly personal because it's told through the eyes of the person that has been offed in this case, and in the case of that song that I just mentioned. So also this idea that it was all done while the this idea that it was all done while the radio played like upbeat pop music makes it all that much more morbid and unsettling. Quite the odd choice of a soundtrack to such a horrific event. And I was reminded so much, even though it's two different scenes and maybe song styles, but like it took me to Tarantino, and it took me to Reservoir Dogs, where you have, Steelers Wheel stuck in the middle playing this sort of upbeat song while this horrible torture scene is happening, ears being cut off and being doused in flammable liquids and all this shit. It's very dark and awful, but you have this song that no one equates to that kind of imagery or scenery, being the loud, boisterous soundtrack to it. And all I can think of is this like Honda with its windows open playing some sort of pop song, while some horrible piece of shit person or people do these horrible things to this poor woman. So yeah, odd, unsettling, wildly interesting song and story being told that is hard not to gravitate toward, as macabre as it all is. It's kind of gross, but it makes you think, and it makes you feel, and it makes you wonder. And I've said it a million times, that is one of the truest definitions of what good art does. So I really hate myself for enjoying this, as a parts of me, as much as I really am intrigued by the bass work and like it obviously flies in the face of tradition, so I have to grapple with that. Then I'm finding myself really admiring the way the story is told, even though the story is awful. And the interesting use of like I don't know, the twisted irony of pop music playing to the soundtrack of a trigger warning sexual assault and murder is all of it has the trappings of rubbing you the wrong way, and it should, and maybe it does, but it has this, it's a weird way of being able to toe the line between doing that and also having its own odd appeal. So yeah, it had all those things, which makes it that much more interesting to me. Said it before, a lot of the times on Nick Cave stuff, this kind of stuff I find very interesting, and kind of an odd glimpse into to human nature and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. It's like watching documentaries on serial killers. I don't know what it is. It's interesting, makes you feel kind of gross for liking watching it, but it is what it is. So yeah, I had an experience akin to that, listening to this song that I did enjoy, but kind of hate myself for liking as much as I do. So yeah, really interesting stuff. Was not expecting this at all when I got into it, both musically and from a lyrical narrative standpoint. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you like what you like, and I like this a lot. So teach me more, John.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff to this. Just to pick up on one of the things you said about this sort of grim fascination with stuff. When I was, I think, 9, where I was in my car with my parents and my sister, and we were stopped by the police As part of the Yorkshire Ripper Task Force, they were stopping vehicles and checking who was in them and where they were going. And obviously, I got away with it because I was 9. No, but it made me think, what if? Because you used to see it on the news, the reclaim the streets, on the TV,
Yeah.
all the stuff. It was a huge paranoia about the ineptitude of the police, everything. It was a massive thing in this country. And it sort of held people in a grip of fear for a number of years. And I remember thinking to myself, what if he's in one of these cars that are in the
Yeah.
queue? And I was fascinated by the Ripper ever since. There you go. It doesn't take much to sort of activate imagination, but
Mhm.
so you can understand this sort of thing. So yeah, this is an amazing piece of art and music. It's not the most hummable tune that you'll ever get, but it is. And this album is amazingly important. And you think of stuff that came after it, and what it inspired. I mean, even something like Permafrost,
Yeah,
Magazine,
yeah,
which
yeah,
will be
yeah.
a year or two
Yeah.
later. But you're talking about the music, and it makes me think of Goodfellas, Scorsese, Be My Baby, sort of nice, sort of
Yeah,
Motown,
that's
and all the
another great
blood
one.
from Pesci,
Yes.
same sort of thing.
Yeah,
But
no,
anyway, so this is from,
excellent shout. You're absolutely right.
yeah, and there's loads more that you can think of. So this is from their second album called Metal Box, which was released in 1979. So personnel, John Lydon, vocals and piano.
Mhm.
Not on this track, obviously.
Yeah.
Keith Levine, guitar, synthesizers, and other stuff we'll get into. Jar Wobble, bass guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, he is, and we'll get on to that. He is a geezer in many ways, and yeah. So the album saw the band moving into a more avant-garde sound. Oh shit!
Yeah. There we go.
Characterized by John Lydon's cryptic lyrics, propulsive dub-inspired rhythms led by Mr. Wobble, and an abrasive metallic guitar sound developed by guitarist Keith Levine. I said it in the previous one in Public Image. His guitar playing is fantastic. It's him and McGeoch at the time, both wonderful guitarists that were inventive and creative. The title of the album refers to its original packaging, which consisted of a metal case tin in the style of a 16mm film canister, embossed with the band's logo, containing 3 12-inch 45 RPM records, which was designed by Dennis Morris, who's a famous British designer at the time. Apparently, it wasn't even that much more expensive to make than a normal record. The album's lack of accessibility was not just in its sound. It extended to the discs themselves. Packaged tightly inside the canister and separated just by paper sheets, they were difficult to remove and were prone to being nicked and scratched in the process. Since each side only contained about 10 minutes of music, the listener was required to frequently change the sides to hear the complete album. So problematic. It was in fact deleted from the catalogue in November 79 after an initial release of only 60,000 units, and the album was then reissued in February 1980, and it was called Second Edition. You remember the first album was called First Edition.
Mhm.
There it is. And it was a traditional gatefold, and the sleeve art of Second Edition consists of distorted photographs of the band members achieving a funhouse mirror effect. The front cover is a composite of Keith Levine and John Lydon. So yeah, I mean, it's great. But the obviously the metal box themselves, they're hard to come by and vastly expensive. You'd have to be an idiot to get one if you already got this. So cue the music. Here comes the idiot, and there it is. And it is a lovely thing to have. And there we have it with you've got this sort of contents there, and as you can see, these are the paper. Be careful with this. The paper separators, and there is the 3 discs inside. Not often got out and played, but as even just a beautiful. This one's not too bad. It's a number of years.
That's a very cool collector's item, though, for sure. That is
Metal one. There you go. And the embossed logo pill there.
Yeah.
It's a lovely thing to have. It really is. That's great as well, to be fair. So the album followed the departure of the founding member, drummer Jim Walker. And so Metal Box was recorded in several sessions with several drummers, none of whom are credited in the original release. Poptones was recorded with Keith Levine, the guitarist, on drums. Yeah, not bad. So just to give the props, David Humphrey was drums on Albatross and Swan Lake. Richard Dodansky was drums on Memories, No Birds, Graveyard, Socialist, and Chant, sorry. Freudian slip. Martin Atkins was drums on Bad Boy, and Levine played all the instruments on Radio 4. In his 2009 autobiography, Memories of a Geezer, Jar Wobble says that Poptones referred to a journey we took in Joe the Roadie's Japanese car, and Joe had one of his dodgy cassettes playing. He highlighted the song as the jewel in the pill crown. That bass line is as symmetrical as a snowflake. We had a drummer with us who was pretty good, but the bloke just couldn't get the right feel for Poptones. In the end, Levine put the drums down on that track. His drums are a bit loose, but that is actually a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Metal Box is widely regarded as a landmark post-punk music and is highly acclaimed. The original limited edition of Metal Box, even that crazy packaging, reached number 18 in the UK albums mainstream charts, which is, incredible. All Music said that Public Image Limited managed to avoid boundaries for the first 4 years of their existence, and Metal Box is undoubtedly the apex, noting that the album hardly sounds like anything of the past, present, or future. They also compared it to the works of Captain Beefheart and Can. And we know that John Lydon was a huge fan of Can. Drown the Sound wrote the album tears away from Lydon's sweaty punk roots and into the cold chambers of dub evoked by Can, the more outre electronics of Bowie's Berlin years, and the coruscanting post-punk sound that guitarist Levine was in the process of pioneering, and that if you don't yet have a copy, you really should. In 2012, the album was ranked number 461 in Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. And it was also included in the book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And, wait a minute, what's this? There's Deborah. And a copy here. Here we have it. And two incredible albums on either page, but there is Metal Box, and right next to it is Off the Wall, Michael Jackson. Very different. Other way, we've got The Damned, Machine Gun Etiquette, and Gary Newman, Pleasure Principle. Great albums. The Specials, one of my favorites. Wow. And going the other way, Gang of Four Entertainment that we spoke about, Cheap Trick, Fleetwood Mac, Tusk, I have a great fondness for. Pink Floyd, The Wall, Elvis Costello and the Traction, and Armed Forces, another great album. Neil Young and Crazy Horse, The Clash, London Calling, The Slits, Cuts. Oh, what a time to be alive. So the lyrics that you did so well, but I shall just complete. It starts off, as you quite rightly say, I tell you what, that sound of the radio retuning. Drive to the forest in a Japanese car, drive, and then it gets into it properly. Drive to the forest in a Japanese car, the smell of rubber on country tar. Hindsight done me no good. Standing naked in this back of the woods. The cassette played Poptones. And he repeats it. Drive to the forest in a Japanese car, the smell of rubber on country tar. Hindsight done me no good. Standing naked in this back of the woods. The cassette played Poptones. I can't forget the impression you made. You left a hole in the back of my head. I don't like hiding in this foliage and peat. It's wet and I'm losing my body heat. The cassette played Poptones. This bleeding heart looking for bodies nearly injured my pride. Praise picnicking in the British countryside. Poptones. So, according to John Lydon's liner notes in Public Image Limited's Plastic Box compilation, Poptones was based on a story, in quotes, straight out of the Daily Mirror, about a girl who was kidnapped and, quote, bundled blindfolded into the back of a car by a couple of bad men and
Hmm.
driven off into a forest where they eventually dumped her. The men had a cassette machine with an unusual tune on the cassette, which they kept playing over and over. The girl remembered the song, and that, along with her recollection of the car and the men's voices, is how the police identified them. The police eventually stopped the car and found the cassette was still in the machine with the same distinctive song on the tape. So she survived, apparently. If that is true, I don't know. So she survived, and it was that through line. But yes, I think this song is all about tension, which is carried mostly by that bass line. The circular guitar kind of spirals, and it reminds me in a way of some of the mind trying to escape some tremendous memory and turn it into a prosaic pattern. Like someone walking in circles and muttering to themselves, everything's going to be all right. It's just going round and round. And the sporadic bursts from the drums kind of threaten all that sort of artificial structure, as it were. It's like reality breaking out. And then that bass line is almost at times, it goes like almost on tilt, like those sort of horror films or TV programs from the 70s, when and you get, things aren't quite right. Or in Star Trek, but more like that. So yeah, it is a wonderful piece of music. It's not something you would just whack on and listen to every other day, but it's a tremendous, as you say, piece of art. And this album as well is just, again, fantastic and so important. So yeah, it's a really, really great.
It's interesting because when I heard you quoting or like these lyrics as the part of the intro in the episode previous that we had done that made these lyrics stand out to me when I heard them when actually listening to the tune. I remember when you were like reciting them, it made me think of I think it's Aokigahara. It's like this Japanese forest where people go oftentimes to commit suicide. It's one of these places in the world, like it's like the Golden Gate Bridge, or these hubs for these awful things to occur.
Yeah,
and the Japanese car and the reference to the forest. That's where my mind went when you were like reading those lyrics. I was like, oh, what song is this? I want to know more about what this is about. Then you gave it to me. Now, obviously, it has nothing to do with Aokigahara or like the Sea of Trees or whatever this place is called in Japan, but it's still something is equally unsettling, the story that unfolds. So it kind of took my supposition and turned it on its head, but still the same end result where I'm left kind of like, after having listened to it. And that story, that anecdote about it being like based, loosely on this actual occurrence is, oof. I'm glad they got the bastards though that did it, because that's awful.
Yeah. I don't know how true that is, but that's what they wrote. So yeah. So one hopes that if it is true, they can fuck us.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I shall wrap things up. Thanks for listening to Sunday. Folks out there, please do hit the like button if you like this, and drop some comments and tell us what you think about this song. It truly is singular, I would say. And the album itself as well, Landmark, is understating it, I think. A great work that Public Image did and the members therein. But yeah, tell us what you think. Other tracks. I think it's probably sacrilege says I'm not a fan of the Swan Lake on this. I think it's pretty naff, to be honest with you. It's the only track that I do think is naff, but you tell me how wrong I am. But yeah, please do. We'd love to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, and help build the channel upwards and onwards to its mighty conclusion. That being said, thanks again so much for watching, and we'll see all of you on the next episode of the Audiophiles.
See you later, guys.